Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatly Tones Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video. Hope you're all doing well. Now in today's video I'm going to be tackling a topic that I haven't seen anyone else on YouTube tackle, and there could be a good reason for that, and that reason might be because nobody cares. But what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be discussing and ranking from worst to best the cover albums of the solo Beatles, but there is going to be a twist at the end. Now, when talking about cover albums, you've got to kind of ask the question, why such prolific songwriters such as John and Paul would turn towards making cover albums of other people's songs when they could write much better songs themselves. And I think for all these albums, there's probably a good reason why these albums were made, but one of them was probably just because they could, because they were established stars, so they were able to have the luxury of going off and enjoying themselves and making an album of songs that they really liked. Now, some of these worked, some of them didn't. There's not that many albums to discuss. We know that Ringo has made 2 cover albums. Paul has made 3. John has made 1, and George has never made 1. So without further ado, let's get on and talk about the albums. Okay, so we've got 6 albums to talk about. Something's Got to Come bottom at number 6. I'm going from this album from 2012, Paul McCartney's Kisses on the bottom. Now, I don't want to be too negative about this album. There is a track called Accentuate the Positive on this album, so that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with the positive. So I do really like the packaging of this album. I like the way this CD is presented with the booklet inside. Now, this album has got this version of this album, because there are a couple of different versions of it. This version has got 3 Paul McCartney originals on it, and I'm not going to talk about those too much. I'm not considering them as part of this this kind of ranking thing, because we're just talking about the covers. But on this album, we've got My Valentine, which is possibly the best song on the album, and that probably tells you enough about this album than you need to know if you know that song. Also a song called Only Our Hearts, which benefits from some really nice harmonica playing from Stevie Wonder, and a reworking of Baby's Request, which is a song that kind of suits this style, but I don't think this version is anywhere near as good as the Wings version. It kind of lacks all the harmonies and stuff. But anyway, that's enough about the Paul McCartney songs. We're not really talking about this. So Paul decided that he wanted to do an album of old standard songs that he heard when he was growing up, sung by his parents and his aunties and all that sort of thing, where they all sat around the piano and that sort of thing. And one thing I will say about this album, sort of 2012 was around the time where we are starting to hear Paul's old man voice sort of creeping in more and more. And for this style of music, which is kind of 1920s, 1930s sort of jazz arrangements, his voice suits this perfectly. The other thing I'm going to say about this album that's a positive thing is the musicianship is absolutely spot on. Very, very good. The band that he's using on this is Diane Krau's band, and Diane Crow you may know as Mrs. Elvis Costello. So the musicianship is second to none on this album. But for me, the problem is the songs. But not all the songs. The first song, "Gonna Sit Right Down and Write a Letter," is a good opening track about a lonely old bloke that has to write love letters to himself because no one will do. We've all done that, haven't we? And the title of the album, Kisses on the Bottom, comes from that, because he draws kisses on the bottom of the letter to himself. But it's a decent enough song. We've also got It's Only a Paper Moon, which is also decent, although I could do without the whistling on it. We Three, My Echo, My Shadow and Me, again, is decent. You may recall that song being used in Better Call Saul Series 4. There's Accentuate the Positive, which I think is a really good song. It's kind of quite upbeat, probably the most upbeat thing here. And Get Yourself Another Fool features Eric Clapton on guitar, some nice little guitar parts on this. And what I do like about this is there's no, I don't think there's a bass guitar on this album at all. It's all sort of a double bass, and that sounds really nice with these sort of arrangements. The songs that sort of, the problem that I've got with this album is this is not my kind of music, and I think if you're in a really sort of mellow, laid-back mood, you could probably really get into this album and enjoy it. But for me, even if I'm in that mood, I can get to song 5 or 6, and I'm kind of reaching for the petrol and striking some matches. I've had enough, and I want to go to sleep. Home is so slow. It benefits from being at the start of the album, because if it was near the end, I probably wouldn't ever get to it, because I would be asleep. My Good Friend, The Milkman, never great to start off a song with some happy-go-lucky whistling in my book. Bye Bye Blackbird is so slow, it almost comes to an actual stop. And it's definitely not the best song he's ever done about a blackbird. But the song The Inchworm just absolutely takes the biscuit. This is the worst song I think Paul has ever recorded. Absolutely appalling, a real stinker. It's got all this counting in it, and I've never really liked songs that have counting in them. Sometimes you kind of get away with it, 1, 2, 3, 4, can I have a little more? You kind of get away with it because it's kind of brief and it's quick and it's all together now, and it's difficult not to like it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Let's Go for a Drive, that kind of gets away with it again, because it's the hook, and it's kind of again, it's quite brief. But this song, 2 and 2 is 4, 4 and 4 is 8, 8 and 8 is 16, 16 and 16 is 32, and on it goes. And then halfway through, the counting continues with kids singing. So he's got counting and he's got kids singing, and it is just dreadful. And this would definitely win some kind of what the hell was he thinking award. I think it is the worst song he's ever recorded or ever put out. Terrible stuff. So my number 6 is Kisses on the Bottom. It's my least favourite of all these cover albums, and quite possibly my least favourite Paul McCartney album of all time. So at number 5, I'm going for this album from 1970, Ringo Starr's debut, Sentimental Journey. And following on from Kisses on the Bottom, this is more of the same, another album of standards, old songs that Ringo heard as a kid. I did it for my mum. He sort of said, apologetically, almost apologising for putting out an album of this sort of quality. But having said that, I think everyone sort of wondered how Ringo would get on as a solo artist once the Beatles had split up, and I don't think after hearing this album it had put anyone's mind at rest that he was going to be okay. But where this album kind of benefits over Kisses on the Bottom is that he uses a different arranger on every song. So every song kind of sounds different, whereas on Kisses, all the arrangements are pretty much the same, and that makes it monotonous. It also benefits from the fact that this album is only just over 30 minutes long, whereas Kisses on the Bottom is pretty much 55 minutes long. So it benefits from that way. But it's interesting to hear Ringo sing these types of songs, and he sings them okay, because up until this point, a lot of what we heard of Ringo singing was sort of country songs. So these are kind of different. Night and Day is a kind of a big band arrangement, quite interesting. And again, you know, the musicianship on this album is very, very good. He also has a crack at Bye Bye Blackbird, which is arranged by Maurice Gibb from the Bee Gees. It kind of starts off with a ukulele and then a sort of an old pub piano comes in, and it's quite a good arrangement. It's definitely better than Paul's arrangement on Kisses on the Bottom. I'm a Fool to Care, arranged by Klaus Vormann. Nothing special really. Another big band song, Blue Turning Grey Over You. Love is a Many Splendid Thing is a song arranged by Quincy Jones, and is an interesting arrangement of that song, I think. Dream is arranged by George Martin, who actually produces this whole album, and it's a pleasant song, and again, but doesn't pull up any trees. I think Stardust, which is arranged by Paul McCartney, again is nothing special at all. Probably the pick of a bad crop on this album is Have I Told You Lately That I Love You. This has got a great swinging 60s feel. It kind of sounds a bit like a Petula Clarkson with horns going off and boom, boom, boom. Great drums and really great bass on it as well. But as I say, you know, this is not a great cover album. But I think that I would probably, if I was up for listening to this sort of music, which as I've said already, not really my thing, I'd probably reach for this one a little bit quicker than I would reach for Kisses on the Bottom, and that's why this is number 5. So at number 4, I'm choosing Ringo's second album from 1970, Beaucoups of Blues, his country album. If there was anything inevitable, it would be that Ringo would record an album of country songs, and we've just learned in the last couple of weeks that Ringo this year is going to release an EP of country songs. It's a genre that really suits his voice. We all know that, and so looking forward to that coming later in the year. And I guess to enjoy this album, you've got to kind of like country music. I do like country music in fairly small doses, but this is a good album. It's a very enjoyable album. Again, crack musicians playing on this, Nashville's finest. The album came about because Ringo met Pete Drake when they both were working on George's All Things Must Pass album. In fact, Ringo collected Pete Drake from the airport, and Pete noticed all the country albums that Ringo had in his car and said come out to Nashville and make an album. And I'm not even sure that this album counts as being a cover album, because all the songs were written for this album for Ringo, so it's not as if other artists had already put these songs out. They were all freshly written for Ringo, but we're going to include it anyway. So as I say, if you like country music, then you'll probably like this album, because there's nothing not to like on it. It's brilliantly played, and Ringo sings the songs really well. But as usual with country songs, the themes are usually pretty miserable. The album opens with Beaucoups of Blues, the title track, which was a single in the US but not in the UK. I first heard this song on Ringo's Blast From Your Past album. That was the first Ringo album that I ever had, and it's a fantastic song. Really like that. There's a track called Love Don't Last Long, where the theme is a man's son gets busted for drugs in Kentucky. He asks his dad to post bail. The dad says, "Bugger off, I'm not paying your bail," and so the son hangs himself. This is the kind of songs we've got on here. There's another one called Woman of the Night, where Ringo's in love with a prostitute. There's a song called $15 Draw, which is excellent, really great song with some fantastic acoustic guitar playing in it and great slide guitar. I wouldn't have you any other way. He does a duet with Jeannie Kendall, and their voices merge really well together. They sing really well together. There's nice twinkling piano in it, and of course lots of pedal steel as well. Loser's Lounge is another song that I like a lot, and it sounds a little bit Beatley. It sounds a little bit like, you know, the country songs that the Beatles covered, that Ringo sang, like something like Act Naturally or What Goes On, do like that one. Waiting is a very lovely ballad, again really superbly sung by Ringo and beautifully arranged and played. The final track, Silent Homecoming, is another one of those themes. So a mother is waiting anxiously for her son to come home from war, which I guess we're led to believe is the Vietnam War, and while she's waiting for him, she's thinking of him as a child and playing at war, you know, throwing plastic grenades and guns and all that sort of caper, and she's wondering whether war would have damaged him, whether, you know, his eyes are going to tell the tale of you know, the killing that he's had to perform on behalf of his country. And when he eventually arrives home, in the very last verse, it's in a hearse. So that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with this album. But you know, you know, as I say, if you like country, you'll probably like this album. I do like this album. This is my number 4. It's a big improvement on Sentimental Journey, that is for sure. Couple of extra facts about this album is that when Pete Drake invited Ringo out to Nashville to make this album, he said his team of songwriters could write the entire album in 5 days, which Ringo said was impossible, but they did it. And in fact, when they went and did the sessions, they actually recorded about 20 tracks. 12 got onto the album, the rest were left off, so there's a whole host of songs that haven't come out yet. But one of those extra songs that was recorded was a song actually written by Ringo called Coochie Coochie, which was the B-side of the American single of Beaucoups Blues, never released in the UK, although it was released on the CD version of Beaucoups of Blues in 95 or something like that, along with another track called Nashville Jam. And both those songs, the original versions, were something like 26 and 28 minutes long, and the session drummer on these sessions, DJ Fontana, said when Ringo was drumming on Coochie Coochie, he never varied his tempo in 26 minutes of a song. Of course, the songs were cut down for the CD release, but great to know that Ringo was on great form. So anyway, Beaucoups of Blues is my number 4. So at number 3, I'm going for Run Devil Run, Paul's album from 1999, an album of 1950s rock and roll covers. I think we kind of know the reason why he chose to make this album in 1999. It's kind of roughly around a year since Linda had died, and it was time for him to get back in the saddle, back on the horse, if you like, and to do an album of familiar songs that he liked, old rock and roll covers, was a nice way of easing himself back into making records again. He chose some crack musicians to play on this: Dave Gilmour on guitar from Pink Floyd and Ian Pace on drums from Deep Purple. The songs that he chose, quite a lot of these are fairly obscure, not that well known, especially in the UK, but he did include 3 original songs on this album, which I'm not considering as part of the ranking, but I'll just quickly mention them. Run Devil Run, a fantastic song, which would have sort of, you know, raised the bar a little bit on any sort of subsequent Paul McCartney album. Try Not to Cry, another great song, which I think if he'd held that back for Driving Rain, which is his next studio album, it would have given that some rock that album was lacking. And What It Is, which is not that great, I don't think. either. So let's talk about the cover versions. The opening track, Blue Gene Vincent song, sounds a little bit like Bebopalula, another Gene Vincent song. Some great reverb on Paul's voice on this song, and great upright bass playing as well. The next song, She Said Yeah, absolutely rocks like a bitch, but I'm not happy with the production on this. The guitar's very sort of distorted on that song. The next track, All Shook Up, is an absolute belter that knocks the socks off of the original, as far as I'm concerned. I think probably the best song here. No Other Baby, for me, is monotonous. It goes absolutely nowhere for about 4 minutes, and even a key change can't really lift it. Lonesome Town, really nice soulful vocals on that one. Then we've got Movie Mag and Brown Eyed Handsome Man, two songs with a sort of a country flavour. They don't really do much for me here, and Croquette is just a bit silly and uninteresting, I think. I Got Stung, another absolute belter. It's like All Shook Up but with different lyrics, but really great song. Honey Hush, again another belter, a song that Elvis Costello covered on his Kojak Variety album. Really good version of that. Shake a Hand has got a great vocal, and Party, the final track, is a belter as well. It is a real stonking track, but it just, to me, it just sounds like everything else on this album. So it is a good album. It's very polished in its production, maybe a little bit too polished. Chris Thomas assisting Paul in the production of this album, but that is my number 3, Run Devil Run from 1999. So at number 2, I'm going for the Russian album, Choba B, CCCP. Nice sleeve notes on the back if you can read Russian. I guess that there are probably going to be a few eyebrows raised that I've ranked this one higher than Run Devil Run, and I think the reason is that this album is not as polished as Run Devil Run, but I just like the songs on this album more than I like the songs on Run Devil Run. Just my choice. I'm sure most of you would probably rank Run Devil Run higher than the Russian album, but let's go through it anyway. Kansas City, it's a good opener, but it's retreading old ground. This is one of my least favourite songs on Beatles for Sale, and this version doesn't really change that point of view for me. 20 Flight Rock, great to finally get like a studio version of this song that Paul has played for a long time as a live song, but I think that the live version on Tripping the Live Fantastic is better than the one we get here. Lordy Miss Claudie, what I like about this is the really great walking bass playing by Paul on here. I'm in Love Again, a great song, apart from that verse, the eeny meeny miny mo bit and the dog noises at the end, but apart from that, I really like it. Bring It On Home to Me, that is a song that I really love. This is the full version of a song that we get about a minute of on John's Rock and Roll album, and it is a song that I really like, and one of my favourites on this album. Lucille, again, Paul's voice, fantastic on this, but I'm just a little bit bored of this song, I think. Don't Get Around Much Anymore, I really like this song, and as well as I'm going to be a Big Will Someday, two songs that I'd never really heard of before I heard this album. I really like both of those. That's Alright Mama, this is Paul being an Elvis impersonator, and the song is fairly average. The next track, Summertime, absolutely fantastic. Just brilliantly bluesy, absolutely superb vocals from Paul on this. This is my favourite track on the album. Ain't That a Shame, the Fats Domino song, a great song, good to get a studio version of this. I think it was all going really well until the sort of overuse of echo at the end, and probably a better version of this on Tripping the Life, fantastic as well. Cracking Up, a song that I really like, that, you know, we get a little snippet of that on as a soundtrack check thing on Tripping the Life, fantastic. Here we get the whole song, and it is a really good song, I think, with a really nice keyboard solo in the middle as well. Just Because is a fun song, not to be confused with John's song Just Because, but some odd lyrics in this. Just because your mama thinks you're the hottest thing in town, little bit weird, Paul. And the album finishes with Midnight Special, which is, you know, a little bit over familiar, but quite an unremarkable way to end the album. But as I say, on the whole, I just prefer the songs on this album to the ones on Run Devil Run, even though it's not as polished, and that is my number 2. So as you've probably guessed by now, my number 1 solo Beatles covers album is, of course, John Lennon's Rock and Roll from 1975. This is easily my favourite of this bunch of albums. This is probably the first of these cover albums that I heard. Probably first heard this back in 1976 or 77. What I like about this album is that although in the main John sticks to the original arrangement, he beefs them up. There's horns all over the place on this album and some sort of, you know, quite heavy arrangements, and he tries to do something a little bit different with some of the songs. Now, we all kind of know the difficulty that John had in making this album. Started off in 1973 in LA, with Phil Spector producing, and John just wanted to be the singer on this, and the studio was flooded with you know, lots of music, lots of local musicians who heard that John was in the studio making this album and all wanted to be on it. So you had like something like 30 musicians all playing out of tune, all completely stoned, and it was a bit of a mess. And John, you know, Phil Spector disappeared with the tapes. John went back to New York. He made Walls and Bridges. Then the tapes showed up, and he called back the Walls and Bridges musicians to help him finish the album. So some of the original work that was done with Phil Spector is on this album, but a lot of it is from the New York sessions with the Walls and Bridges musicians. But somehow John managed to produce something creative from you know, chaos, to quote a phrase. So let's have a look at what we've got on this album. Kicks off with Bebopalooza, Gene Vincent cover. Great way to open the album. Again, lots of reverb on John's voice on here. Then we go to Stand By Me, which of course was the single. I think it got to number 20 in the States, about 30 in the UK, and it was obviously John's last single for quite some time. Really good version. John's voice sounds absolutely superb on this. Rip It Up, Ready Teddy is a medley where you get a little snippet of both songs, but they kind of segue together really well, and it's quite exciting. And I really love what he does with Chuck Berry's You Can't Catch Me, which was the kind of the reason that John had to make this album in the first place, because the opening lyrics are identical to what he used on Come Together. And but I really like the arrangement of this song. Lots of open spaces in this song, loads of reverb again on his voice, and he just sounds so good. follows that up with Ain't That a Shame, Fats Domino's song. I think this is better than Paul's version on the Russian album. Really good version of that with loads of good piano in it. Do Wanna Dance doesn't really work for me. Not a favourite on this album. And Sweet Little 16, again, really good cover. This is one that did survive the Phil Spector sessions, and John's voice is a little bit buried in the mix, but a very sort of heavy arrangement on this song. Slipping and Sliding, that opens side 2, is probably my favourite song on the whole album. Absolutely fantastic. Really great song and a great version. Peggy Sue sticks pretty much to the original, I think, and you know, it's okay, but doesn't pull up any trees. Then we come to the medley, Bring It On Home to Me, Send Me Some Lovin', which I really love. I love the Bring It On Home to Me, where John's voice is double tracked all the way through. Sounds really great. But this sort of medley kind of has got my favourite bit on the whole album, and that's got sort of halfway through Send Me Some Lovin', where John kind of does that hiccupy Buddy Holly type join. My days are so lonely, that bit. I love the way that he sings. That's probably my favourite moment on the whole album. Boney Maroney and Ya Ya pretty much standard, kind of stick to the original arrangements, but just because the album closer I think is fantastic. Really love that song, especially the monologue at the end where he appears to be saying goodbye to everyone and thanking everyone, and it's when we kind of knew that this was going to be his last album. He was going into his semi-retirement period. It was kind of, he was saying goodbye to his recording career. So John Lennon Rock and Roll, that is my number one. I really love this album. So I did say at the top of the video there would be a little twist at the end of this video of the ranking of the covers albums. Now obviously George Harrison has never done an album of covers. He's never sort of indulged himself in that kind of caper. But what if we were to invent one for him from the songs that he's covered throughout his solo career? So I've put together an imaginary album of 11 tracks of songs that George has covered. So here goes. So we've got If Not For You from All Things Must Pass, Bob Dylan's song. Bye Bye Love from Dark Horse. True Love from 33 and a Third. Baltimore Oriole and Hong Kong Blues from Somewhere in England, to Hoagie Carmichael songs. I Really Love You from Gone Troppo. Got My Mind Set on You from Cloud 9. And Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea from Brainwashed. I Don't Want to Do It from the Porky's Revenge soundtrack, Bob Dylan song. Let It Be Me and Mama, You've Been On My Mind from Early Takes Volume 1. I think there's 4 Bob Dylan songs in that. So that is my sort of cracking George Harrison imaginary covers album. Now, what if we were to, if that was a real album, where would that rank in this ranking chart? For me, it would probably be number 1, because obviously, the problem that I have with these covers albums is that they're all genre based. So, by the time you're getting, halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, you're kind of a bit tired of the songs in the same style, whereas all these are all in different styles. So this would probably be my number 1 if it was a real album, but it's not. So Rock and Roll remains the number 1. But I'd love to hear what you think. Tell me what you think about these covers albums. How would you rank them, if you want to tell me that? And where would you put this imaginary George Harrison album if it actually exists? I'd love to hear from you. As you know, I read all your comments. I will respond to all your comments as well. Okay, that is pretty much it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. My next video is going to be about you lot. My next video is going to be something about the psychology of being a Beatles fan. It was a video request from one of my subscribers, Julia. She asked for this, and I'm going to be talking about us as Beatles fans. Are we absolutely stark raving bonkers? So that's coming up later this week. As I say, thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all soon. Bye bye.